was the last time you felt lonely? The time you felt empty, alone, or unwanted? It could be 3 years ago when we all experienced COVID. Or it could be yesterday when you had no one to meet or hang out with on a beautiful weekend. Or even this morning. Recently, I came across an interesting article about loneliness. It says loneliness may be as deadly as smoking up to 15 cigarettes per day, and the lack of social disconnection or lack of social connection can increase the risk of anxiety, depression, stroke, heart disease, and dementia. Thus, it stresses the importance of having meaningful relationships with others to combat loneliness. In today's text, Jacob is completely alone in a rocky wilderness. We learned last week how he deceitfully obtained the birthright that belonged to his twin brother Esau. And right before today's text, there's another story in the book of Genesis that tells us about Jacob's deceitfulness. When Isaac, the father, was old and his eyes were dim, he decided to bless Esau, his firstborn son. Now, the firstborn blessing was a big deal because it established the identity of the heir. While Esau went out in the field to hunt and to make a delicious meal for Isaac before receiving the blessing, Jacob, with his mother's help, disguised himself as Esau and stole the blessing. Of course, Esau became furious once he found out about it and made plans to kill Jacob. But their mother, Rebekah, sent Jacob to Haran, where her brother lived in Mesopotamia. Now we see Jacob fleeing from home for his life. He is running away from the wrath of his brother, who is outraged by his deceits. So for the first time, Jacob is all alone in the wilderness. Unlike Esau, who loves to go outside for hunting, this quiet, home-loving boy has never been alone in the Rocky Mountains before. But this time, he is really alone. He doesn't know how far he has to walk or how long it will take him to get there. There's no navigation, map, or compass, nor car, bicycle, or horse. In fact, it's about 550 miles from Beersheba to Haran. It's like walking from Ridgewood, New Jersey to Columbus, Ohio. So it's a long journey by himself with lots of uncertainty. On the road, Jacob must have had mixed feelings. He must have regretted his deceitful actions towards his brother and father. He must have been frightened that his brother might come after him. He must have been anxious about getting hurt by dangerous animals or strangers on the way. He must have been worried about whether the uncle he never met would welcome him or not. He was fearful, anxious, vulnerable, and lonely. Have you ever felt like Jacob? The times you felt like you were stuck somewhere between guilt, disappointment, loneliness, and fear. I have. And I think we all have at some point in our lives. When we are in deep despair and are hurting, when we have lost a loved one, when our relationship is shattered, when we feel betrayed by a friend, when our career path that we thought we would excel at just evaporates, when we must deal with a sudden injury or a chronic illness with ongoing pain, we often wonder, where is God in this? I'm sure Jacob asked the same question as he was falling asleep on a stone pillow. Lord, I heard so many great things about you from my grandfather and father. You promised them you'd bless our family with many descendants and lands. Here I am, the heir of Abraham and Isaac, but I'm about to die in the wilderness. Where exactly are you? On that very night, God appeared in Jacob's dream. He saw a vision of angels going up and down on a stairway that connects heaven and earth. And God stood at the top of the stairway and reiterated the promise God made to Abraham and Isaac. I am the Lord, the God of Abraham and Isaac. The ground you are lying on belongs to you. I'm giving it to you and your descendants. And your descendants will be as numerous as the dust of the earth. And all the families of the earth will be blessed through you and your descendants. But that's not all. God didn't stop there. He said, I am with you and I will protect you wherever you go. One day, I will bring you back to this land, and I will not leave you until I have finished giving you everything I have promised you. This was Jacob's first encounter with God. Growing up, he only heard of his father and grandfather's God, but now he knows that their God is also his God, and that God's presence would never leave him. But let's think for a second. The God who has the power to create and sustain the whole universe and has infinite wisdom wants to be with this deceitful man. Why? It is incomprehensible in our minds, since Jacob doesn't deserve God reaching out to him. Yet no matter how many times Jacob made mistakes and how deceitful he was, God still seeks to save him. This is nothing but pure grace. And God's willingness to enter a covenant relationship with human beings cannot be explained without the Hebrew word, hesed, which denotes God's steadfast love or faithful, unfailing love. When Jacob got up, he said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I wasn't even aware of it. But the truth is, God wasn't with Jacob only in that place. God was with him all along when he was with his family in Beersheba, and even when he was in his mother's womb before his birth. But now Jacob's eyes are open to see God's presence in his life. A psalmist also confesses God's presence in his life in today's second reading. He says, "Oh Lord, you know everything about me and everything I do. You know what I'm going to say before I say it. You go before me and follow me. I can never escape from your spirit, and I can never get away from your presence." These words assure us that God knows where we are and that there's no place we can hide from God. Now, in our culture, we're so used to individualism, and some of us might question, where is our privacy? Why does God have to be everywhere and know everything? But psalmist praised God for God's inescapable presence in his life. It's like he's saying to us, it is good news that God searches for us to know each one of us. It is good news that God knows us more than we know ourselves. It is good news that there's nowhere in the universe that God will not be present to lead and hold us. Because our lives are derived from God, belong to God, and will find the true destination in God. After the encounter with God, there has been a radical change in Jacob's heart. Nothing has changed in his circumstance. He is still fleeing for his life and has a long way to go. But his heart has changed. He is now conscious of God's presence, which takes away his guilt, fear, and loneliness, eternal inheritance. When I was in seminary, I had a chance to take the PCUSA ordination exams. If you're wondering what PCUSA is, it's the name of our denomination, the Presbyterian Church of the USA. Anyhow, in order to become an ordained pastor for the exam, my 11-year-old son back then got sick with a nasty stomach virus. For several days, he was vomiting and had a high fever, which required my consistent care day and night. Each night after he fell asleep in my bed, I cried out to God for help. Then I would sit at my desk in the corner of my room with only the desk lamp on and study for the test until I would get too tired to go on. I was miserable, vulnerable, and fearful like Jacob. A few days after the exam, I was in a spiritual formation class. We were asked to find a partner to contemplate and pray for each other. So my friend, I found a quiet spot and spent a good amount of time praying. When we were ready to share our insights, my friend told me that she saw a vision of me sitting at a desk in the dark and studying. She also told me that she saw Jesus standing behind me, putting his hand on my shoulder, trying to comfort me. As soon as I heard her, I could picture Jesus and myself at that very moment in my head. And I burst into tears because I knew what she had just described to me was true. But I wasn't aware of Jesus' presence at the time. Sometimes, all we need is a little reminder that God is with us. And we need each other for that. We might not see a vision like my friend or Jacob, but saying a simple, kind word, showing up to listen, offering help, praying together, and sharing joyous and sad moments. These are the ways we can remind each other about God's faithful presence among us. And in doing so, we can become conduits of Hesed, God's faithful love. May we always remember that God is with us, no matter what circumstances we face. May we always find strength in Jesus Christ to overcome all difficulties in our lives. May we always be filled with the Holy Spirit to be the conduits of Hesed to this world.